What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and what I wanted to do in this video is have a discussion about the Infinity Gauntlet, or at least explain the Infinity Gauntlet, actual gauntlet to you guys. I mean, I've got the main Infinity Gauntlet story, but I thought it'd be kind of cool to run over this. So when it comes to the Infinity Gauntlet in Marvel Comics, I mean, I would say by and large, both the story and the object itself are probably two of the most popular things ever created in the history of comic books. But one of the biggest misconceptions people have is that the Infinity Gauntlet glove had basically been... Well, I guess really the Infinity Gems had essentially been created like during the Infinity Gauntlet story. That's not necessarily the case. When it comes to the Infinity Gems, they appeared in a lot of different stories. I mean, well, they really originated in like a handful of stories, like Marvel Team Up number 55, Marvel Premiere number 1. Guys like Bill Mantlo and like Jim Starlin, they're the ones that really helped to like create the Infinity Stones and bring them into Marvel Comics. In truth, the main Infinity Gauntlet story and the actual Infinity Stones themselves kind of being assembled onto the gauntlet, that was a story that was around 20 years in the making. But the cool thing about it is this. Within the Marvel Universe, in terms of like the actual gauntlet, that wasn't realized by Thanos until like the first time he died, basically. I mean, I guess it's really the second, depending on how you look at it, but it's really all kind of prefaced by something called the Thanos War. Now, the Thanos War, that was a series of events written really by Jim Starlin himself. I mean, he was the guy that kind of based all that stuff. And it really all goes back to Iron Man number 55 when Thanos first showed up. From the time that Thanos first appeared until the time that Thanos gained the Infinity Stones for the first time, Thanos was, this whole Thanos War thing, it was him just kind of looking to destroy everything. That's really all it was. The first time he faced off against the Earth superheroes, he was looking to gather the Cosmic Cube. The second time, it was when he discovered the existence of the Infinity Gems. But he didn't know what the Infinity Gems were capable of. All he ended up doing the first time he gathered the gems was basically channeling all their power into a huge synthetic stone and then flying around the universe in the most inefficient way possible and blinking out all the stars in existence. Thanos' knowledge and really the first revelation of the Infinity Gems didn't actually come until really it was probably Thanos Quest, or really like a Silver Surfer story. The way this played out was that when Thanos died after gathering the Infinity Stones for the first time, he was in the realm of Mistress Death, and he discovered something called the Infinity Well. And the Infinity Well is basically this artifact that if you ask it a question the right way, it will give you the answer to anything you want. And Thanos had asked the question, what's the origin of the Infinity Stones, and how powerful are they? And so what the Infinity Well did was spew the whole origin. Now, something to bear in mind here when it comes to the origin of the Infinity Stones, this origin, the origin of the universe has been retold over and over and over and over again. So you can take it for what it's worth. It's not an absolute truth. But what we're told by Thanos, really in the Thanos Quest story, is that at the beginning of all things in the universe, there was just this singular being, and it was lonely because there was nothing else but it inside the universe. And so what it did is it took all the power that it had, and it channeled each property of those powers into the Infinity Gems. So this being's power over reality was channeled into the Reality Gem, its power over time into the Time Gem, so on and so forth, and then dispersed the gems across the cosmos. They essentially just kind of sat unused and unknown for eons and eons and eons until various people began to discover them and use them for their own purposes, not knowing the full power of the Infinity Gems. From there, Thanos had actually approached Mistress Death and said, give me the ability, like resurrect me, send me back to the universe. I can assemble the Infinity Gauntlet and I can achieve basically killing everything in existence and appease you and make you happy and so on and so forth. Mistress Death did that, and that led into a story called Thanos Quest, where he basically travels around the cosmos and starts gathering the Infinity Stones everywhere he can find them. Now, from there, one of the things that I misunderstood for a long time is I always believed that Thanos Quest led directly into Infinity Gauntlet. It actually doesn't. There's a Silver Surfer story that segues in between, and I want to say it was a story Jim Starlin was writing in the probably around 1990, maybe the late 1980s, and it runs, I want to say it runs between like issues 51 and 52 up to like 59 or something along those lines. I could be wrong. I know that the series, I know Jim Starlin stopped writing it in the 50s, I think. But essentially what happens is Silver Surfer learns Thanos is gaining the Infinity Gauntlet. He's assembling the Infinity Stones. Silver Surfer tries to stop him. Thanos wrecks him and sends him flying across the universe, and he lands in the home of Doctor Strange and says, dude, we're so screwed. You have no idea how screwed we are. We're so screwed. We're all gonna die. Thanos is gaining the Infinity Gems. And so that leads into the actual Infinity Gauntlet story. Now, for the most part, that story is probably one of the most well-known in all of comic books. If people don't necessarily know the events that go on in it, they know know the name. And if they didn't know a whole lot about it before, they certainly know a lot now because of the Infinity War film that's coming out. So people have done a lot of research on it. I've got videos down in the description that you're welcome to go check out that run over the Infinity Gauntlet story. Issue number 8, I don't believe is there yet. I'm sorry, part 8's not there yet. I actually need to re-upload that, which I'll do here in the next day or so. But the fact remains here that following the events of Infinity Gauntlet, or at least for those of you guys who are unaware, basically it's Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet just wrecking everybody, the cosmic entities and what's left of the Earth superheroes, and blinking out half the life in the universe and so on and so forth. This may be a spoiler for Infinity War. I don't really think it will be. I think Infinity War will end with Thanos destroying half the life in the universe. But at the end of the Infinity Gauntlet story, Nebula takes the gauntlet from Thanos. And the biggest issue with this, the reason why that's a problem, is because Thanos was just looking to gain absolute power. That's all it was. He was just looking to gain godhood. Nebula is as crazy as my ex-girlfriend. Nobody knew what she was going to do. Like, she was just nuts. Like people freaked out. They were like, okay, Thanos wanted godhood. Who knows what Nebula's going to do? She's going to turn the universe into some twisted, screwed up place. And so because of that, you ended up having Thanos, who allied himself with Adam Warlock and what was left of the Earth superheroes, and they showed up and they basically confronted Nebula. It really kind of boiled down to like smoke and mirrors and shadow games. And ultimately, Adam Warlock seizes the gauntlet from Nebula and then ends the conflict, fixes everything that Thanos undid, or Thanos screwed up, and then the story ends. So this goes into the Infinity Gauntlet Aftermath, which is Warlock and the Infinity Watch Volume 1. And the reason why this is an aftermath is because immediately after Infinity Gauntlet ends, Adam Warlock is taken before the Living Tribunal and the various cosmic entities and so on and so forth, and he's essentially put on trial. And the argument that's made here is that Thanos sought to replace Eternity, the supreme being of the universe. Adam Warlock seeks to rule alongside Eternity, and that creates an imbalance in the universe that the Living Tribunal must judge, that it has to preside over and give a ruling for. And so the Living Tribunal basically says Eternity's rightful role is to be the supreme being of the universe. If Adam Warlock seeks to replace Eternity, that's fine, but Adam Warlock cannot rule alongside Eternity. And because Adam Warlock didn't seek to replace Eternity, ultimately the Living Tribunal judged against Adam Warlock, deactivated the Infinity Gauntlet, and then said, now you have to disperse the gems. The gauntlet will never work in unison, but you have to assign the gems to other people. And so Adam Warlock ultimately created the Infinity Watch. Now, I know Thanos was part of the Infinity Watch. I'm pretty sure Gamora, Moondragon, and Pip the Troll were as well. Of course, Adam Warlock. And then I want to say maybe there was one more. I can't remember off the top of my head. But ultimately, what this group was designed to do was to safeguard the Infinity Stones. That leads directly into the Infinity War storyline, which is starkly different from the movie. It's going to be drastically different from the movie. The overall gist of the Infinity War story was that this kind of came with this revelation that when Adam Warlock first gained the Infinity Gauntlet, he had subconsciously purged himself of good and evil. He had his evil half in the form of the Magus, and he had his good half in the form of the Goddess. The return of the Magus basically saw like the Infinity War story progressing in such a way that we saw all these doppelgangers of various superheroes and villains and so on and so forth that were created by the Dimension of Manifestations at the request of the Magus. If you don't know what the Dimension of Manifestations and Anthropomorpho is, doesn't matter, not a huge deal. And so because of that, what Magus also did was travel around the universe and gather all these travel around the multiverse and gather all these different cosmic cubes. And that was designed to serve as a distraction, as a ruse. Because then what the Magus did is while everybody else was hunting and fighting these doppelgangers and so on, the Magus was running around gathering the Infinity Stones. And now during this time, Adam Warlock had realized what was going on and basically went to the Living Tribunal and said, you have to reactivate the Infinity Gauntlet in order for my plan to work. And so the Living Tribunal did that, basically reactivated the Infinity Gauntlet so it would always work whenever the gems were brought together in unison. This story ended with the revelation that what Thanos had done is he had actually replaced the real Reality Stone with a fake one. And so when the Magus had gone to use the Infinity Gauntlet, it didn't work completely. He didn't have all of its power. This allowed Adam Warlock and the various superheroes to slip in and then essentially defeat the Magus. Story ends. From there, it goes on into like the Goddess and Infinity Crusade. Doesn't really have anything to do with the Infinity Gauntlet for the most part. At least the story is not nearly as significant. But following Infinity War, probably going forward for about another, let's see, that was 1992, 1993. So going forward from that point for about 10 years, the Infinity Gauntlet wasn't really seen again. I mean, it appeared in like flashbacks and it appeared in like small stories here and there. But for the most part, like having an actual story arc unto itself, that didn't happen until the mid-2000s going up until 2010 with the Heroic Age. Now, in terms of like the mid-2000s, this was significant because what this did is it basically gave us the Illuminati. Now, the Illuminati were created by Brian Michael Bendis, and it was a genius idea in terms of what he did. But what he did is he sat down and he said, okay, so like Tony Stark, I think it was, I want to say it was Tony Stark, had come to this realization that in the early days of Marvel Comics, of course, with there having been a story called the Kree-Skrull War, which is actually what Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is teasing this season, or maybe it'll be next season where it happens. In any event, that's the big invasion that's coming, is a Kree-Skrull War. Because of what had happened, the Kree-Skrull War had gotten exceedingly close to Earth, close enough that it almost destroyed the planet, this war between the Kree and the Skrull empires. And so Tony Stark had come to the realization that, like himself and Charles Xavier of the X-Men and Doctor Strange and Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four and Naaman the Submariner, and these various people had tidbits of information that, if they had shared it, would have kept the Kree-Skrull War from getting as close to Earth as it did. And so Tony Stark proposed that the group basically come together and form a kind of secret society that would operate behind the scenes, and nobody would know who they were. And this was the creation of the Illuminati. Now, the first meeting place was in Wakanda, right? Like, they show up in Black Panther's homeland because no one can go there unless Black Panther invites them. So it's the perfect meeting place. And Black Panther, like, right off the bat is like, do not do this. This is a terrible idea. Like, this idea is as terrible as Sony making Marvel movies. Do not do this. Like, it'll fail. It'll be disastrous. It'll end terribly. Like, and it did. Oh, the Illuminati ended in the worst way possible. Oh my God, it was Captain America doing like an international manhunt for the Illuminati. They flew across the universe trying to find the Illuminati. It was insane, with that whole story. But the fact remains here, the Illuminati essentially went forward as this group that did like all these different schemes and these different things behind the scenes. One of the first things they did is they traveled to the Skrull homeworld, and they said, look, your Kree-Skrull War almost brought ruin to Earth. Do not come back. If you come back, we'll come back here and we'll kill you all. Like, we will annihilate every last one of you. The Skrulls took the Illuminati, knocked them out, scanned their bodies, scanned their DNA, and then sent them on their way with their memories wiped, having no idea what happened. What ended up actually happening is the Skrulls analyzed the genes of the Illuminati and then began analyzing the genes of all of your superheroes, and that led into the Secret Invasion storyline. There were things like the Illuminati banishing the Incredible Hulk from planet Earth because he was deemed to be too dangerous. That led into Planet Hulk, which led into World War Hulk. Basically, the idea was that the Illuminati kept screwing up over and over and over again. But with regards to our discussion here, one of the big things that happened with the Illuminati is that Reed Richards had basically sat down and said, okay, so the Infinity Gems are insanely powerful individually, but when they're united and they're brought together and the Infinity Gauntlet is reformed, that person will be virtually unstoppable. And so there's only one group who's capable of keeping the Infinity Gems protected and never using them, and that, of course, is us. It's the most arrogant thing ever. Like, we as the Illuminati, we have investigated ourselves and we have found no wrongdoing. Like, it's the most arrogant thing that any group could possibly do. But the Illuminati basically start traveling around the universe, almost like Dragon Ball, and basically gather like all the Infinity Gems. Now, the funny thing about this is that when Reed Richards goes to like reassemble the Infinity Gauntlet, because he's like, well, we just need to check and make sure that it works, the Watcher pops up, and the Watcher's like, dude, you need to stop. Like, do not reassemble it, do not use it, do not do any of that. I know what you're gonna do. Do not reassemble the Infinity Gauntlet. And where Reed Richards is like hell-bent on reassembling the thing, suddenly he has a change of heart and he says, yeah, you know what, I shouldn't reassemble this. And then basically takes the gems, puts them in like a secret box, hands them out to the Illuminati, and then that's it. What we end up finding out is that Charles Xavier had actually messed with the mind of Reed Richards and like planted the idea that Reed Richards needs to put the Infinity Gauntlet away. And so it was like, damn, like, man, Xavier's powerful. Like, he's a super powerful guy. But what this does is this goes into the Heroic Age. Now, the Heroic Age was the culmination of 10 years of work done by Marvel. A little bit of history here. In the early 2000s, really in the late 1990s, with Marvel suffering from near collapse and the huge comic bust of the 90s, Marvel brought in a guy named Joe Quesada, who had basically held a company alongside Jimmy Palmiotti called Event Comics. And they basically published a bunch of the characters, published stories on characters that were not going to sell comics, but still had a fan base. And so Marvel, in the early 2000s, late 1990s, Marvel only cared about big names: X-Men, Fantastic Four, Avengers, and so on. Black Panther, Daredevil, those guys, Punisher, they weren't considered bankable names. They were popular, but they weren't really selling. People knew who they were, but they just didn't really sell any copies. And so Event Publishing basically wrote all the stories for that, and that's where you get Marvel Knights. And so what ended up happening is Quesada came in the early 2000s and basically cleaned house. So we got things like the marriage between Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson wiped out during the events of One More Day. The Avengers book was basically canceled and then relaunched as New Avengers. There were a whole bunch of things that went on. House of M, the mutant population was reduced. It was insane. But there were all these stories that took place over the 2000s that were designed to get superhero comics back to being superhero comics and manageable. And so the Heroic Age came out of Dark Reign, which was when Norman Osborn took over as director of S.H.I.E.L.D., disbanded it, replaced it with Hammer, and then tried to conquer the world. Because, you know, when you're a bad guy, that's what you do when you have absolute control of like the Earth's militaries. And so because of that, you know, following the defeat of Norman Osborn, people were like, oh man, we can't do this again. We have to go back to being good guys, and so on and so forth. And so the Heroic Age saw the relaunch of the Avengers, the relaunch of Uncanny X-Men, all these different things that went on. In the first story arc of the Heroic Age, of the New Avengers title, a guy by the name of Parker Robbins, also known as the Hood, had basically learned the Illuminati were hiding the Infinity Stones. And so what he did is he started traveling around, and it was a crazy story. It was stuff like the Red Hulk got the Power Stone. Like, it was bonkers. It was really, really cool. But at the end of it all, Parker Robbins ends up traveling to the mind scale. I want to say it's like the astral plane, the mind, whatever it is. Like, he ends up traveling to like the astral plane, basically. We can just say it's that, and tries to capture the Mind Stone. All the Earth superheroes like meet up there, and then Tony Stark and all the other superheroes successfully defeat Parker Robbins, and then Tony Stark takes the Mind Stone, reassembles the Infinity Gauntlet, and Iron Man gets the Infinity Gauntlet. And so following that, when the whole thing's said and done, Iron Man's like, okay, we're gonna fix everything that Parker Robbins screwed up, and then we're gonna destroy the Infinity Gauntlet. And then he was like, ta-da, it's gone, you know? But in reality, he had sent it back to the headquarters of the Illuminati. And so what ended up happening is the Illuminati dispersed the Infinity Gems amongst themselves once more. This leads into Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers when the Incursions start happening, right? Like, you know, the universes crashing into each other because of what Molecule Man and Doctor Doom did. And so because of that, the Infinity Gems are brought together by the Illuminati. They're reassembled. Charles Xavier, of course, has been dead since Avengers versus X-Men. And so Captain America basically takes his place. And so you have the Infinity Stones that are brought back together again. The Infinity Gauntlet is reassembled because the Illuminati believe the Infinity Gauntlet, being so powerful, can stop the incursions from happening. So when a universe starts to make its way towards the main Marvel universe and the impending crash within 8 hours begins, Captain America takes the gauntlet and tries to push the universe away. Ultimately, it fails, and all the Infinity Gems, except for the Time Gem, are totally destroyed. They shatter in their entirety. The Time Gem just vanishes, just disappears into the time stream, eventually comes back, and then whisks Captain America like 50,000 years into the future or something like that. But the fact remains, like, that's basically the end of the Infinity Gauntlet. As far as it stands right now in Marvel Comics, the Infinity Gauntlet exists now. There's actually a story called Infinity Countdown, which is leading to the reformation of the Gauntlet and all the Infinity Gems coming together and so on and so forth. It's basically like Thanos Quest on a grander scale is really all it is. So it's essentially just a rehashed story told a different way. But the fact remains, like, that's kind of where we stand right now. Somebody out there is reassembling the gems. It's a race to reassemble the Gauntlet, and then who knows what'll happen from there. But nonetheless, hopefully this helped you guys out. For those of you guys who are new to Marvel Comics, those of you guys who aren't really familiar with the Infinity Gauntlet as a concept, as an idea, or the object, hopefully that helps and gets you guys sorted out. And at the very least, you go forward into the Infinity War film having a pretty good idea of what to expect. Essentially, what's going to happen in that movie is it's going to be like the worst case scenario. Like, you're going to walk out of that believing everything's hopeless for Earth superheroes, because what chance does Captain America stand against the might of a god? So it's going to be kind of cool. It's going to be pretty awesome. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy the video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.